afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion with His Royal Highness, Prince Turki Al-Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Prince Turki is no stranger to the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. For nearly 20 years, he has participated in activities presented by our Liechtenstein Institute on Self-Determination. Most recently at an international seminar in 2021 examining Afghanistan and the West. I am happy to share that he will visit the school again this fall. His Royal Highness is a former ambassador of Saudi Arabia to the United States, as well as the United Kingdom and Ireland, and he also served as Director General of the Saudi Intelligence Agency. He will be in conversation with my colleague and friend, Ambassador Dan Kurtzer. Dan Kurtzer is former ambassador of the United States to Israel and to Egypt. Dan is the S. Daniel Abraham Professor of Middle East Policy Studies, a position he has held since 2006 after a nearly three-decade career with the United States Foreign Service. My thanks to Prince Turki and to Dan Kurtzer. I know they will have much to share on the Israel-Hamas conflict, the future of Saudi-Israeli normalization, and other critical issues related to the U.S. and Middle East more generally. And with that, over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Amani, and it's a privilege and an honor to join you, Prince Turki, Your Royal Highness, in this conversation.
Thank you.
And we have quite a few listeners. You and I will converse for a while. If anybody has questions in the audience, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll see if we have any time to get to them. My intention, though, is to try to cover the waterfront with His Royal Highness. And I'd like to start, if I might, with a kind of strategic overview. Saudi Arabia is pursuing rather ambitious policies domestically with respect to its own economy, diversification, new city along the Red Sea coast, with respect to its energy policy, and with respect to foreign policy, rapprochement with Iran, rapprochement with Qatar, possibility of normalization with Israel. And I thought I would start by asking Your Royal Highness to step back and provide something of a strategic overview and outlook. What are the prospects of success? What are the barriers to be overcome? How do you see things unfolding in this period ahead?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kurtzer. It's a privilege to be with you. That's a tall order for me to address in an hour or so, but I will try my best to be as precise as I can in the sense that the kingdom has been and continues to be a work in progress in terms of development, in terms of responsibilities and obligations, not only to the people of Saudi Arabia, but to the region and to the world community. And as everybody knows, God bestowed upon us certain benefits materially, and we've been over the years since its foundation, the kingdom has been trying to play a role of a constructive role of hopefully bringing adversaries to peaceful mends, and also establishing security and stability in the kingdom and around its region. This has been a major aim of the kingdom. So very briefly, since King Salman became king in 2015, he has been pursuing this goal of stability in the area and development, not just for the kingdom, but for the region and the wider world in general. I always say to my interlocutors that the Arabian Peninsula, if we could cut it off from the Asian mainland and sail into the ocean and lay anchor somewhere near Norway or Sweden, we wouldn't be bothered by so many hotspots around us. So if you look at geography, simply from the east coast of Africa to the west coast of the Arabian Gulf, to the Mediterranean area and the Arabian Sea, we have these hotspots that we have to deal with. And maintaining stability and security is a big challenge for us. And I think not just for us, but for the world community. I hope that gives an overview of what you asked for.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it does. Geography is destiny, and you don't have the luxury of sailing off into the North Sea. So I do want to talk to you about your own neighborhood. Let's start with the crisis that's now engulfed this region, which is the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. The kingdom, in some respects, seems to have been playing something of a role in the background. Qatar and Egypt are in the forefront of hostage and negotiations, ceasefire negotiations. What role is the kingdom playing in trying to deal with this issue and bringing about some end of the war?
Well, the kingdom has been canvassing support internationally for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. And it comes from a long-standing policy since the beginning of the Arab-Israeli struggle, even going as far back as the 1930s. And when Israel was established in the 40s and the subsequent events, the Six-Day War, the 73 War, the various conflicts that occurred not just between Hamas and Israel, but also Israel's neighbors with Israel. So we are, if you like, not just cheerleading the efforts of countries like Qatar and Egypt, but also we're pushing the world community. As you know, during the conflict that is going on, the kingdom held several summits, the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and the Islamic Cooperation Organization in order to canvass support for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And the kingdom headed a special committee of the Islamic organization that traveled around the world to meet with leaders, not just in the United States, but in Europe and in Asia and Africa and everywhere, to support efforts through the United Nations to bring peace to the area. But one thing that many people don't realize is that we don't have relations with Israel, for example. So we do not engage with Israel. We do not have relations with Hamas. So we do not engage with Hamas. Whereas Qatar and Egypt have relations with those contending parties. And so they have taken the lead in trying, with the United States, in trying to forge some kind of, I wouldn't say roadmap, but more of a proposal to first of all, to end the fighting, and secondly, to go forward to a final resolution of the conflict between Palestine and Israel and the Arab world and Israel.
Do you think that at the end of this conflict, as all conflicts, it will wind down? Will Saudi Arabia, perhaps others, Egypt, Jordan, maybe the Emirates, be willing to play a post-war role in stabilization? I think everybody wants to see Israel out of Gaza, wants to see no residual presence of Israel, but a quick withdrawal would create a vacuum, security and political. Have you been doing any thinking about how that vacuum gets filled?
Let me just mention that I do not speak for the government. And when I'm speaking with you, I speak as an individual with my own thoughts. So that has to be made clear. My thinking is that this is not just an Arab responsibility. This is a world responsibility. And all of us have roles to play. And should there be a ceasefire and a plan put in place to bring an end to the existing conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the kingdom and the other Arab countries, I think, would be willing to share with the rest of the world certain responsibilities. I cannot say what those responsibilities are, but I'm sure that they would not hesitate to engage with the United States, with the European Union, with Israel and other players in the area, with the United Nations. But the precondition for all of this really is a set of what I would call important signposts that need to be applied to make sure that we get to where we want to go. One of those, of course, is that there are spoilers in the area who would like for the conflict to continue, including, if I may say, the two contending parties, whether it is Palestinians with Hamas and so on, or the Israeli government with its present composition of the ultra-right political parties in Israel. So I think it would be important for the world community through the United Nations to issue a set of conditions on pursuing peace in the area here that would bar and prevent these spoilers from having any effect on the process of achieving peace. That would go a long way to mitigate and remove from the table these parties that would rather see conflict take place rather than a peaceful resolution. So these are thoughts, I think, that could be considered by the world community and the leadership in the world. And perhaps through that, they can go forward and forge some kind of summit or meeting that can bring those who accept a two-state solution to set the stage for a two-state solution.
Understanding that you are speaking in your personal capacity and also as the chair of a very influential think tank in the kingdom, and drawing on your extensive experience, what might some of those principles be? Obviously, the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002, as it's been updated over the years. There's the Clinton parameters, the Kerry parameters. Are these the kinds of things that you're thinking about that would be brought forth to indicate that progress is possible, or are there some additional issues? I'm thinking in particular that Saudi Arabia also stands at the forefront of a religious community worldwide, and given the weight that you carry in Sunni Islam, are there issues within your religion that might help deal with some of the spoilers who are acting in the name of religion, but perverting it in some ways?
Well, I cannot speak for those who follow other than the Muslim faith, of course. But as far as Muslims are concerned, yani there are conditions for example, waging war that have not, unfortunately, been applied by Hamas when it attacked the Israeli colonies, I call them, in around Gaza. But though definitely there is room for people of faith to enhance and enlarge the issues of what all the people of the book share in the principles of for humanity, for the betterment of humanity, whether it is peace in our time, whether it is issues of common God that joins us together, and simply applying the humanitarian precepts and conditions that exist in international law and in humanitarian law. These are, I think, things that can bring the faith communities together to support something like that.
Let me just ask a specific question. You referred to the communities around Gaza as colonies. Was that a word choice specific or just a passing
Well,
phrase?
you know, I'm not good at Hebrew, but I think, as I understand it, they're called kibbutz in Israel, which in my study of history and so on, somehow has a colony connotation to it. You know, going out in the wilderness and building out of nothing a community and so on. It is from that aspect that I refer to it as colonies. But of course, yani, the more appropriate description of colonies, of course, is what is happening in the West Bank, rather than on what is Israeli territory per se. So that is where I came to it from.
Sure. Well, thank you for the clarification. I ask it because as part of our domestic protest, especially on college campuses, some of the protesters are now saying that we need to relitigate 1948. In other words, Israel's very existence. And when they're asked about it, I had this experience on a college campus where I said, well, no, the occupation has been since 1967. The response was, no, the occupation has been since 1948. So there is I think, a radicalization of thinking in the United States about this issue, which is going to make it more challenging for us politically to deal with it, let alone in terms of policy as we move forward.
As far as I can tell, the Palestinian people, as represented by the PLO, have committed to the 1967 resolutions that passed from the Security Council 242 and 338, defining the occupied territories as being the West Bank and Gaza. And they are the ones who Palestinian Authority in Palestine. I don't think, with due respect, the college demonstrators speak for the Palestinian people. And I've seen recently, in a recent meeting that was held in Moscow, I think a couple of months ago, or maybe 3 months ago, that Hamas attended, that there was a statement that came out of them that they would be willing to accept the PLO's commitments to the resolutions 242 and 338. So even Hamas publicly has stated that that is its view of what is Palestine today.
Yes, and of course, the Saudi initiative from 2002 rests on that same principle. So it's
absolutely.
Yeah. Before October 7th, there was a lot of buzz, I guess you'd call it, about the possibility of Saudi-Israeli normalization, the U.S. helping to broker it, including U.S.-Saudi commitments, possibility of a defense treaty. And interestingly, even during this war, that has remained, at least publicly, as part of the picture. What are the prospects? Have they gotten much worse as a result of the war? To your knowledge, as a well-informed figure within the kingdom, is this something that can be pursued once the war winds down, comes to an end?
Well, I will quote to you statements that came out from official sources in Saudi Arabia, whether it is the Council of Ministers or various representatives of the Saudi government. When asked about this issue, their response was that we will continue to engage with the United States on finding ways to pursue the issue of a pact with the United States on issues of security and defense matters and nuclear development, etc., but also the establishment of a Palestinian state, which would have to precede any normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So these are official statements that have been made during the past 6 months. Most recently, during the World Economic Forum meeting that was held in Riyadh, I think a week or 10 days ago, where one of the ministers mentioned this again. So I don't see any inhibitions about furthering the discussions with the United States. If you remember, Prince Mohammed gave an interview before October 7th, in which he said that we were very close to reaching some sort of agreement with the United States about these matters. But unfortunately, the events of October 7, of course, sort of sabotaged all of that effort, but not to the effect of ending the discussions. And I've seen media reports about visiting delegations from the United States pursuing with Saudi officials the issue of a security pact with the U.S. and the civilian nuclear development in the kingdom, plus establishing a Palestinian state and then subsequently going for normalization with Israel.
I understand it's hard for both of us to know the details of the U.S.-Saudi discussions on a defense treaty.
Right.
Given your experience in Washington as ambassador, what are the possible roadblocks that need to be overcome, particularly with the Congress, which may be concerned about some particular aspects? And I'm thinking mostly about the nuclear issue. As far as I understand it, there's been some resistance on the part of the kingdom to sign an agreement about the fuel cycle, the 123 agreement. What's your reading from where you're sitting in Riyadh about the mood in the Congress with respect to this major strategic enhancement in U.S.-Saudi relations?
It is definitely one of the bigger stumbling blocks to reaching an agreement. Many in Congress have publicly stated that they would not support any Saudi-American nuclear developments jointly. So that is something for not just for the kingdom, but for the administration to work on, to show that there would be, as I read in the press and hear from officials on both sides, that there will be certain guarantees shared by both sides that may meet the requirements of congressional concerns about how those developments of nuclear cooperation between the U.S. and America can come together. As you said, Yani, I am not privy to the details of what these precautions are, but it is still, like Saudi Arabia, it is still a work in progress. So I'm sure that hopefully, if we can get to ending the conflict in Gaza and go on to talk about a Palestinian state and so on, that all these issues can then be addressed. And both sides will have to do a lot of lobbying with the U.S. Congress to make sure that their concerns are met by safeguards.
You know, when I landed in Israel as ambassador 20-something years ago, I told then Prime Minister Sharon I wouldn't interfere in his politics, and he laughed. I think we're going to need you here in Washington to help your ambassador lobby the Congress, because there will be a lot of questions on all aspects, not just the nuclear issues, but also what it means in terms of U.S. commitments. I want to stay on this subject for a minute, because as you noted, Prince Hamad and others coming out of the World Economic Forum and other statements have indicated that there has to be a credible pathway and irreversible pathway to a Palestinian state. What, in your view, would Israel need to do or say that would convey that kind of a commitment of credibility and irreversibility?
Well, Israel in the past has accepted resolutions 242 and 338 as the basis for peace negotiations with the Arab world. Even during the Camp David Sadat-Begin agreements, those two resolutions were upfront in the negotiations and the agreements between Sadat and Begin, and subsequent commitments by Israel with Jordan, for example, entering into peace there, etc. Israel's engagement in the Oslo Accords with the late Yasser Arafat also maintained this linkage and commitment to the statements coming out of 242 and 338. This government in Israel, unfortunately, have abandoned all of that history of commitment to resolutions 242 and 338. Mr. Netanyahu has publicly said he doesn't want a Palestinian state, as would be required in the settlement of 242 and 338, since it identifies the West Bank and Gaza as occupied territories. So it is up to Israel to not only recommit to the 242, 338 principles, but also to show some goodwill, I think, towards the Palestinians. When Oslo was signed, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and optimism around about how Palestinian territories would fall back into Palestinian control and the lines that were drawn, etc., etc. There was some movement there on the part of the Israeli government at that time that indicated a bit of goodwill towards the representatives of the Palestinian people. That has disappeared from the present government's conduct with not only Hamas but also the PLO. Just look at what's happening in the West Bank, and it's a shame that all of that previous something like 20, 30 years of work has been thrown away by this Israeli government. And hopefully a new government that can come to Israel will reaffirm those previous commitments and be more proactive in seeking a peaceful solution with the Palestinian people. It is, after all, the Palestinian people are the crux of the matter, not the Saudi people, not, with due respect, other countries that have gone, or whether it was the Abrahamic Accords or etc. And this is where I think something has to be seen to be done, rather than simply either talked about or presumed by interlocutors and mediators, whether it is the UN or other players.
Do you think, going back to the years after the Arab Peace Initiative was launched, I know there were a number of efforts to try to get Israel to reciprocate with an Israeli peace initiative that could then be used as a kind of balance, and then you start to talk about where there are differences. Is that, you think, a productive way to proceed, as well as the reaffirmation of 242 and the better relations with Palestinians?
Definitely. And as you said, the Arabs have put their proposal on the table. There has not been a reciprocal Israeli proposal. All the governments that succeeded the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002 until today have never presented a comprehensive view of what it is like for a peaceful resolution to be done between Israel and its neighbors. So that would have to be, I would presume, one of the things that would show goodwill on the part of any new government in Israel towards reaching a final solution to the Palestinian issue.
In our collective role of psychiatrists in this conflict, um, the trauma in Israel has not abated since October 7th. The trauma in Palestinian society has not abated since the Israeli attacks on Gaza and the destruction and so many people killed. What do we do with this? You preside over a think tank. Have any of your experts been thinking about what kind of steps the two peoples can take toward each other below the government level to signal a willingness to deal with the post-traumatic stress that obviously is setting in and will continue to set in?
Well, yeah, I think both peoples have suffered trauma, even before October 7th. And if I look at my history courses from that I studied in America and so on, the issue of the Holocaust on not just Israeli, but on Jewish thinking in general is a huge load on every Jew's back, if you like, and their thinking and so on. And if I think of the issues starting with the Balfour Declaration for Palestine since the First World War, and all of the history that followed from there on the Palestinian people, that is also a huge load on their back and their thinking. So I wouldn't dare play the role of a psychiatrist, with due respect, to propose any therapy for both peoples on how to deal with that. But I would respectfully point out that when Oslo was signed, much of that baggage that was on both sides' backs and bearing weight on them seemed to lighten a little bit. And we saw how people came together, and businesses were formed. I'm sure marriages were consummated, joint studies were put together. One of the things that I remember, a fabulous project that the man who funded your care, Mr. Abraham, proposed the railroad around the West Bank that comes from the north of the West Bank all the way into Gaza. That, to me, it really, it was something that tackled the imagination of anybody who wanted to find ways of bringing the two people together. So there are, I'm sure, if there is a sincere commitment to reaching a solution, that issues like that can be reignited again to try to lift some of this heavy baggage on the backs of both peoples, of their trauma and experiences like that. But I don't have any specific ideas about that, but I'm sure they would be able to come up with them.
I remember those years well when we all approached each day with a kind of optimism that we were just about to unlock the door to a peace settlement.
Right.
Let me, if I might, ask you to take a tour about the region, around the region, and to talk about Saudi relations with neighbors other than Israel. Maybe we'll start with Iran. You had the Chinese effort to try to build rapprochement. How is that going as far as your assessment?
It is as far as I can tell from public sentiments and public statements on both sides, that they're trying to get something positive out of that. And I would just remind us that the whole issue, actually, we must give credit where it's due. Our Iraqi brothers were the ones who initiated the discussion between Saudi Arabia and Iran, then supported by Oman. And then both sides not only accepted but welcomed the Chinese contribution to bring them together to actually sign an agreement on how to overcome the challenges of the previous conflict between us and to move forward towards better relations with Iran. I'm still optimistic about that, but I will have to wait and see about more positive steps from Iran, particularly vis-a-vis Iran's militias in the area, and not just the Houthis in Yemen. But Iran supports militias in Syria, for example. They brought militias from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Iraq, and injected them into Syria. Hezbollah, of course, is a major player in that factor. It also has impact on Israel, Hezbollah. The Iraqi militias that keep lobbing missiles and drones, not just at American forces in Iraq and elsewhere, but also in the past, some of them even there has been talk that they launched certain projectiles at the kingdom some time ago in support of when we were still in conflict with Iran. So that to me would be a clearer indication of where the intentions of Iran are, not only towards Saudi Arabia, but towards peace in general. I was frankly not much impressed with the, I would call it the pas de deux between Iran and Israel that took place. It seemed to be a very well orchestrated conflict. Both sides throwing rocks at each other, making sure that they don't hit any sensitive targets, and claiming that they have done what had to be done. How to interpret that, I really don't know. But definitely, to me, it was more of a comical exercise rather than a strategic engagement between the two sides.
I raised my eyebrows a bit on that characterization. When 300 drones and ballistic missiles and so forth get fired in one direction, and then at least a certain number of missiles, both from outside Iran and inside, get fired in the other, I'm not sure it's simply a minuet, but it's true that there was a lot of signaling that went on to try to prevent escalation. And I guess we're at the post-engagement stage to see whether or not that signaling worked. Continuing our tour around the region, has Bashar al-Assad reintegrated into the region? And how do countries?
Well, he seems to be.
Yeah, but how do countries like Saudi Arabia deal with all the damage that his regime inflicted on his own people, and the horror of internally displaced people and the killing of so many Syrians by Syrians, and with the help of Russia and Iran?
Well, I can tell you, I'm glad I'm not in government to deal with that issue. I don't envy any of our officials that have to face these issues of past conduct by him and his regime. But I really don't know what is happening on the ground. And if I were to say something or other, I think I would not be helpful in any way on that issue. But as I said, Yani, I think the officials are pursuing this matter, and I would leave it at that.
You mentioned a moment ago Iranian support for the Houthis. I guess the Saudi Houthi war has essentially wound down, but the Houthis are now a major international factor in terms of shipping in the Red Sea, which directly impacts Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and others. How do you see that situation evolving with the Houthis?
I'm sitting here in wondering at all the irony of all of this. Saudi Arabia facing condemnation and reprehension from even its allies on the events in Yemen that preceded Gaza, and especially vis-a-vis the Houthis and whether they should be on America's terrorist list or not, and Mr. Biden coming out and lifting them from that list, and now he's put them back, Yani, and it's not Saudi aircraft bombing the Houthis, it's rather American and so-called allied aircraft, British and French and so on, that are bombing the Houthis. To me, that is so unexplainable, really, that how things have moved around that much, where the kingdom now has rather engaging with the Houthis vis-a-vis what is happening in Yemen, and those who were used to be urging us to engage with the Houthis and make peace in Yemen are now in conflict with the Houthis, and it is something that is should not have happened, in my view, but there it is. And the only thing that the kingdom can do, in my view, is to try to call everybody to calm, to reduce the rhetoric and the firing of missiles and drones and things like that. Whether the kingdom will be responded to by either the Houthis or the American and other allies, we'll still have to see how that works out.
If we expand the lens aperture and look at the big powers, China, Russia, the United States, start with Russia, which I guess the Gaza war has taken some of the pressure, international pressure, off of Russia with its activities in Ukraine. How do you see that situation impacting both stability in Europe, but also as it relates to your region?
Well, as far as Europe is concerned, I would say that when we were, if you like, in conflict with Israel over the years, Europeans and Americans always used to tell us, you have to sit down with the Israelis and talk to them. And you remember when none of the Arab states would recognize that there was even a state called Israel. And so finally we came around and we did that. And what has been happening is happening. And yet I see no reciprocal or similar call for sitting down between the conflicting parties in the war in Ukraine. I can not necessarily understand, but I can see where Europe particularly is really scared of Russian intentions after Ukraine, and whether other targets will be taken over by Russia or not. But as you mentioned, yani, all conflicts have to come to an end. And it is better that they come to an end through negotiation than through continuous military conflict. And I think this is where Saudi Arabia is today in trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. We have very good relations with the Ukrainians, but also we have relations with the Russians. And on issues of exchange of prisoners and so on, the kingdom played one of the roles in overcoming some of that exchange of prisoners. But it's up to the Europeans and the Americans. Are the armaments that they are supplying to the Ukrainians going to drive the Russians from Ukrainian territory? I don't think so. The kingdom has voted for United Nations resolutions condemning the Russian invasion and the infringement on international law by Russia. But where do we take it from there? All I see is more destruction on Ukraine meted out during this time, and whether the 60 billion or whatever, is that enough to allow the Ukrainians to push back against what the Russians have done already? It just seems like the First World War, just attrition and death and destruction. So there is, I think, a room for somebody to call enough is enough. Let us sit down and find a solution. Who is that going to be? I don't know. But I don't think it is either beneficial to the Ukraine nor to the Russian people to continue to kill each other. One of the ironies here again, and I'm always surprised by these ironies around. Both of them accept that they come from the same stock. It's incredible, and that going at each other's throats like that is I don't know. It's unacceptable.
Well, they say that about the Israelis and Palestinians as well. They're really brothers, and that's what makes the fight so difficult.
Indeed.
In the Russia-Ukraine situation, one of the, I think, understudied implications is the impact on food security and water security. And I just wonder, from your assessment, how both the kingdom is coping, but also some of the less wealthy countries. I was in Egypt recently, and they, of course, rely a great deal on the importation of grain as a water substitute. How are different countries coping with this?
Well, as far as the kingdom is concerned, we have managed to stock ourselves with enough grains, I think, from Russia and from Ukraine through international trade. But you're right, the poor countries are the ones who are paying the high price. So the kingdom, in that perspective, has aid programs for the poorer countries, either through the Islamic Development Bank or through the World Food Organization in the United Nations, or some of the other international institutions that provide support for poor countries to feed themselves. The kingdom is a major contributor to all of these.
We are coming towards the end of the hour. I want your assessment, though, both from the experience that you had in Washington, but now as an astute observer of the U.S.-Saudi relationship, its strengths, resiliency, the weaknesses, the challenges. We're in an election year. I don't expect you to tell me how you would vote, but we're a polarized society. How do you see the bilateral relationship at this time?
Well, let me just recall to you when I was ambassador in Washington, 2006, I remember a new crop of congressmen and women were elected during George W. Bush's administration. And they asked to meet Arab ambassadors. So I was one of those that met with them. And I told them, ladies and gentlemen, every resolution you take, every decision you make, every statement you put out has a direct impact on me in Saudi Arabia. So I would respectfully ask you to allow me to vote in your elections because that way I can make sure that I'm represented in your constituencies. They all laughed, of course, but you know this is how the world has become now. And one of my favorite pastimes, and I've done it now consistently since the first Obama administration, is to be in the United States for the elections. I thoroughly enjoy watching the spectacle of American elections, and I compare it to a Bollywood movie. You know, there is a lot of drama, there is a lot of comedy, there is a lot of love and treachery and backstabbing and bravery, etc. And it all comes to a head in November, the first week of November, and I get excited as to who is going to finally get to the finishing post there. So I will be there this year, hopefully, and God willing, to watch your elections. And as you mentioned, Yani, I'm not going to offer any prognostications about who's going to win, but it's a lot of fun watching how you all go about it. Every 4 years, it's a repetition of the same cycle, but even with more drama and more intensity than the previous 4 years. So thank you very much for allowing me to enjoy that spectacle.
Well, you've given me something to think about as we head into this crazy season. And we do look forward
Good
to
luck
seeing
to
you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. We do look forward to seeing you when you're here, inshallah. I think October you mentioned, and hopefully we'll be able
Yes,
to get
inshallah.
together at that time. Thank you so much for this
I
hour.
look forward
It's
to
been
that.
tremendously edifying, and we really appreciate it.
And I hope one day you will come and visit again. Yani, you've been here before, so please, Yani, don't keep yourself away. And if you have to bring a class with you from Princeton, please bring them with you. And I think they will enjoy, meeting people and seeing how Saudi Arabia is going forward.
Thank you so much. I will take you up on that. I thank you again, and
Very good.
be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.